Hi, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well and enjoying some good weather. Hopefully, there's good weather, um, generally speaking, all across the board. We're having a few days of good weather, so that's a bit uncanny for us. Almost looks like summertime. We're into the early 20s. I have a
30s.
uh, it'll be 30s tomorrow. I guess maybe if I'm correct. So this bit really warm for us. We have a couple of questions left. I have a question from Lee, and I'm not sure if I've already answered this, Lee. Um, you say, when life mapping, for example, why should we have to remind consciousness of our need for it to be gentle, balanced, and appropriate? Um, the dilemma with that is really that you're really talking to yourself. And we have a very strong relationship with our own personalities. And the dilemma is that we continually um, maintain those relationships with our personalities because we're constantly talking to other people, and uh, we end up engaging with them relative to how we think we need to present to be valued by others. And this is normal and natural. So um, all of us do this kind of thing from time to time. And what happens there is that you're trying to get a deeper link. So in a kind of a way, you're telling yourself to uh, be kind of gentler, more engaging. You're paying attention, strangely enough, as if you are part of that higher state, and you are part of a system that is in automatic, which is imperfect like the rest of us. And you're trying to deepen uh, your gentleness, your balance, and uh, you have an aspect, everyone does, in you where you value certain ways of being. And those ways of being that you value are either known or not known by you. So that higher state is actually trying to present those methods that you use because you've constructed them by using that higher state, especially that state that's able to be right here. And what you do then in that particular moment is you're trying to gentle that down. It shows you how you function eventually. And so when you're talking uh, to consciousness, that's what people call this, because it's easier to call it that. It doesn't imply, uh, as our personalities might say, uh, states higher than us. It's really a bit funny. We are a bit funny, no offense, but it's how we are. So you say that being presumably omniscient, doesn't it already know that we need what we need before, and even better than we do? Yes, but it needs you to know. That's where the learning comes in. It's inviting you to be like it, to know more, to understand deeper, and not to be disrespectful to you for not knowing. Uh, there's lots of stuff that we don't know. And that's at this level. At other levels, we are very presumptuous in thinking we understand stuff. And we don't, because we're engaging with, little by little, a movement towards experience that will help us to understand that we are a kind of learner, even though we're an adult, and we are the one in charge now, or should be, or so we think. But we're really not always in charge of anything, although it helps us to feel comforted to be at least attempting to be in charge of something, us. Is our request actually primarily to remind ourselves? And you've got it right there. It helps us to understand deeper us. And this is very subtle at first. You don't catch it. And you create a little gap by wondering about how you're engaging and how you're functioning. There's a little slight gap there that you create because you're interested. And then suddenly you begin to realize that you're also being presented with those things that you're supposed to see or might see. But it's not doing it in a negative way. It's doing it in a gentle, kind way, respectful way. See, did you see this? It's okay. It's not meant that you should terminate everything that you're doing and then become something else. That isn't the goal. The goal is to recognize and understand and make sense of and realize that we are that way in our human genome, for example. It's the way we have cultivated things from the beginning. And without the knowledge of perception, we only do it in relationship to position and place that we acquire, and therefore we are. That's how we are, and this is how we should be. There's a certain amount of that has to continue to make us feel comforted by every day when we get up. Okay, this is what I can do. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And see how that works out and make adjustments during the day. That's just called living. And why in some cases would consciousness, at least says, seem to send us more energy than we can handle? And that's where that little piece that I was just talking about plays out. Sometimes we see things and understand things from a perspective, and it's a biased perspective, of course, but it's our bias, so that's the value that we place on these things, and it should be placed on those things until it's not placed on those things. In a kind of a way, we get in touch with learning again. It is assumed that we're open to that, and we're not. We're not as much open to it as we believe we are. So little by little, it seems as if we're not able to understand something a little deeper than how we can. Is there a perfect way to do it? I don't think so. Whatever which way you do it is a rendering that is consistent for you, because it's through trial and error that we do these continual things and try to maintain a method of surviving our daily interaction with life. And surviving meaning feeling okay about how we function. Some days are definitely tougher than others, that's for sure, because we don't quite understand what's going on. Sometimes we understand that we don't necessarily have to blame others for us having a bad day. then we recognize that it's our way of engaging with others that is pronouncing a bad day because it's uncomfortable. And learning how to calm that down and recognize that in our world, there's a dilemma. None of us, every one of us face. We have things within us that are, let's say, far from perfect. And we don't always do a thing that may be helpful to us. But we often say, well, I did the right thing, or this way or that way. And it's often not. But it doesn't. It follows the line, the schema that's already in us that we've learned how to do, and we do the best we can. Continuing to do that is one way of finding out whether you're comfortable with how you function, because you're not always comfortable with how other people function. And they're doing the same thing, trying to figure out how to do things, and they haven't reached a point where they can do that quite yet. It is part of living. This is this field of expression that we're in that touches us in ways that are uncomfortable or comfortable. And then we assess these things, these zones and contexts and how we function in them from a particular point of view or a biased point of view. Fortunately, sometimes we think that that biased point of view is absolutely correct, and sometimes we don't. Better to think that way. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, than always thinking you're the only one that has it the right way. Because then you're not open to learning. You're opening to maintaining the rightness of an engagement. Or the opposite way, the wrongness of an engagement, depending on your basic upbringing. We have difficulties in engaging with life. Well, let me see if there's anything else, Lee, that I might have said. I said, we are the ones who are talking to ourselves to be gentle. We are not aware of our intensity. So we are asking, in a way, for softening, the softening of us with energy that can help to do so, including energy that relates to you. Our defenses try to maintain our intensity the way it is, comforting and attempting to remain the same sense of control, have the same sense of control or value. I hope that helps a little bit. It certainly doesn't include the difficult times that a whole bunch of people have on this planet. These planes are harsh and they are coarse. I think the best we can do is attempt to become conscious, the best we can, of that higher state engagement that we have within us, that we use to engage with life. Whatever your biases are, they're there because you use that methodology to find a way to live life that's comforting to you. And you use that flow, that higher state flow, which is patient. It doesn't tell you how to use it. It wants you to find out for yourself. Because the language of you me, anyone else, is the language of bias, the language of our training, the language of what we believe has to be true because we're the ones that think it. And that language is just a language. It's not real. It's an option. And it's often, I'll say it out loud, a fiction. It's not real in that way. So, however, it is real in another way. We use it the way we do because we have trained ourselves to do so. And in some things, it really helps. In other things, not so much. So we're trying to become conscious of that flow that is so compassionate that it will allow us to do in life what we think is the right thing to do or right thing for us to do. And so we can watch it and learn that it will do what we want to do. So it also will give us hints about something that might be not helpful. Sometimes those of us with a big heart and a lot of kindness will overdo. And sometimes some of us with a strong will underdo. And sometimes we'll just do what we do. And I hate to say this out loud. It's a lot of doo-doo. And it's a terrible thing to say, but you gotta have, attempt to have a sense of humor about it. And I apologize for that embarrassing engagement, but nonetheless, tickles my fancy. It may not tickle anybody else's. Thank you, Lee. And it says all the best, Lee and Carol. So thank you, Carol, as well. Hey, here's another question. And I'm running out of questions, so I'm thankful to Michelle. He sent 2 or 3 questions, so I'm asking for more questions. If you don't mind, if you have some that you think might be interesting, don't worry about. As somebody said to me the other day, my questions sound so silly after I've written them down. I said, all of us are in a silly position in relationship to our growing. All of you out there think you've obtained some great high level. That's the fiction. That's a kind of fiction. And it's a fiction that is difficult to overcome. So here we go. Until a few years ago, Michelle says, the Earth vibrated at an average frequency of 7.8 hertz. I had heard of that one because of a book that I had been looking at way back in the 70s. I'm not even sure it's in print anymore. And it was really about vibrations on the planet. She now vibrates at over 75 hertz, 8 times faster. I don't know that. So I'm going to have to acknowledge that you know something a lot more than I do in that one, because I have no clue. If this is true, this may explain, at least in part, why we have the impression that time passes more quickly. Could be, Michelle. And then because there is a correlation, and there may be, between the law of vibrations and the law of causality, it's sometimes that may be true. My question is, what can we do to adopt harmoniously to these changes? If the Earth is vibrating more, we will be affected by a vibration of sorts. We're affected by every other vibration. I wish I had a picture of, all of you have seen a prism before, probably in high school, where you see different frequencies, from radio frequencies to X-ray, including gamma frequencies and various, and a small little area of visual frequencies, exceedingly small. And those frequencies that are related to that prism, light coming in and being split into many colors, one could say. Those colors are just the frequencies we can see here on the physical plane. According to this orientation, that you can begin to recognize that there are other frequencies that we don't see. Like, you don't see microwave frequencies, you don't see radio frequencies, you don't see TV frequencies, although you can watch TV. You don't see X-ray frequencies, you don't see gamma ray frequencies. The issue is these frequencies still touch us. Too many X-ray frequencies, and it can cause cancer. We didn't know that back in the 30s. And we had some scientists who suffered deeply in relationship to experimenting with many of these frequencies. Madame Curie, for example, who died when she was experimenting or attempting to understand radiation. And because of her, we're able to understand it a little bit better. But the question is, what can we do to harmoniously adapt to these changes? One of the things that we can do to help our biases that may be intensified as right, wrong, good, bad, is to soften down and consider and reconsider and reconsider and reconsider and look for options other than the ones that we believe have to be right. The reason for doing that is that if you come up like that, you will have increased intensity come in to want to more validate how you think things are. And most things are just options, like frequencies of various kinds, like frequencies in relationship to a piano, how our ears hear it. Some people are basically tone deaf. Some people believe they have wonderful voices. They don't, but they believe that. Some people actually do have beautiful voices. The thing that is different about their voice is an added engagement within a frequency that is similar to another person, but they don't have that particular added ingredient, that purity of tone. This is true of all of us. If you are a singer out there, you understand what I'm talking about. It doesn't mean that you have a bad voice, but in conjunction with other options, sometimes how you express will be of great value. Sometimes how others express vocally will be of great value. There's always a rendering and a listener and a responder, an added feature, which may tend to validate, no matter what, exactly how a person believes their bias to be valued. But it doesn't mean they are. That's what we're learning. We're learning to attempt to understand an interactive frequency within us that is so subtle at other levels. But at this level, we need it to be usable so we can express life the way we believe we have to, because we have been trained to do so, and we've taken on images that we believe are wonderful because we've lived around them. So we've mimicked tones. All of us, without any doubt, mimic tones of expression that are personalized over and over and over again, and they become features or characteristics of a personality that is highly valued or not that valuable. But you cannot then battle the bias of an individual about their great value. The individual themselves is in a process in spiritual growth of understanding themselves. Now, the great adage of know thyself has been around for well over 2,000 years. And of great value in the eyes of Socrates, the old Greek philosopher. Knowing you and also knowing who you mimic and learning that sometimes that may be helpful, but most times it may be not, because it is not you. It is someone else that you are intoning and expressing with or without your knowledge. This question is really interesting because it relates to frequency and intensity relative to Michel's teaching us about an increase in vibration. I'd like to know where you got that information, Michel, because I'm curious about these kinds of things. Just as an aside. But then, of course, the question is, what can we do to adapt? And I said, soften down, be attentive to how you express yourself. See where something is similar to somebody in your past. Realize that in a younger age, you grabbed onto that, and you would perform that to be an adult of so-and-so, speaks like this, does like this, express themselves like this. And knowing that that is not you, but we are pieces and parts of many. So learning about you, seeing you, and wondering whether that is really appropriate in this case, in that case, and another case. This is not easy to do. Otherwise, everyone would be doing it, and they would be enlightened in short periods of time. There are people who think they're enlightened, and they're not enlightened. They don't know what it means. They think it means they're right. Right is not enlightened. So, of course, there are the tools. And it is true, there are the tools. And you can use them to soften down the natural reflexes that come out of those chakras that are used continually for the purpose of acting or expressing oneself the way their biases tend to ask them to do so they can feel comfortable. This is a natural thing. This is not bad. This is what everyone does. But the tools will soften that down, turn the hands on, get those hands moving at a different level than the coarser levels. Try not to take credit for any improvement in a way that increases your self-importance. This is really difficult. You could do it this way. Okay, I saw that. It seems like this worked. That energy comes in under those circumstances in a way that relates to helping me see more. So your perception is increased. It's uncomfortable to see something in a different way than what you're normally used to. This is not an easy way to engage with higher states, but it is a way to engage with higher states, and it does work. The easiest way to do it is to just tell everybody you're engaging with higher states and insist on that being true. It's not real, yet it is. You are engaging with higher states to construct a personality the way you believe you need to have it, to be more right than anybody else, or to be more wrong than anybody else, or to be in the middle on a continuum from 0 to infinity. But it doesn't mean that it's real. But our personalities may have been constructed on that basis, and it's then very difficult to understand ourselves differently than our bias insists we do, so we can feel more comfortable. We have a lot of stresses inside ourselves around being valued by others. And I have a real interesting piece of information for you. For everybody, for me too. Nobody's impressed with you. They're too busy being impressed with themselves. No offense to anybody out there, including me. But if you can keep it in a humorous place, and we're far too serious about spiritual stuff, and that is true, because it is a serious thing. But it's a loving thing, not a harsh thing. And this is hard for us. Many of us have had very uncomfortable upbringings. And that means we have some difficulties sometimes in those areas. But one of the tools that I think is helpful, certainly helpful for me, is doing the pump extremely slowly. So slowly that even your personality wonders whether it's doing any good. And don't believe your personality, because it can't perceive anything but the coarser levels, plus a little bit. And that little bit can feel like it's huge. One drop feels like Niagara Falls, and don't stand under Niagara Falls. Just too much water, too much power. If you do the pump really slowly, and I'm talking about something like this, I don't know, I move my head about an inch, half an inch, wait, slowly, think of my neck, let my head come back, half an inch, slowly, Let it go forward. Half an inch. Slowly. Pull it back from the neck. Take your time. You're in no hurry. And then do the same thing again. Give it some time. Rest. Significantly. About a half an inch. And the energy will increase softly. Gentle your shoulders down, your body down. Do it softly. Yeah, but Ron, I can't feel it very well. I can really feel it when I go like that. Yeah, because you're pushing your own will into it. So it comes in. Is that what you want to do? Yeah. So now I can really feel it. Oh, that's really important. I can feel it. Yeah, but that makes your personality important. You move it so slowly, and you start to notice the energy, and you're watching it instead of watching your important personality. I'm talking like as if that's easy to do. It isn't. It's not. Because our intensity wants to approve of it in terms of how you would experience it yourself. Do it yourself. This is a normal thing in all of us. We want to be the one that does it differently than anybody else. We want to be the one that is valued because they did it this way and that way. This is our upbringing. This is normal. This is not negative, but it is there. Another way to look at that is if you can get it to move and watch it move, even though you're only moving a half an inch, and you start to be aware of that energy whipping up strongly, it can get pretty strong. Now you start talking it easy. That's a little too strong for me. And you start doing it a little faster, because when it's a little stronger, you'll do it faster. It's a reflex. You can watch yourself doing it. And then you talk to yourself, like in Lee's question. Lee and Carol. Easy does it. Oh, easy, easy. That's a little too quickly. Who are you talking to? You're talking to yourself. You're the experimenter. You will always have a bias in what you think is occurring until you slow that bias down. Then you can have an opinion that's neither right nor wrong, good or bad, just an opinion, and you know it. And now you're engaging with it kind of scientifically. Will it happen again when I do that tomorrow? I wonder why. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I do notice that was like that, but today it's slightly different. I wonder if that's because I'm trying to see things differently. I wonder. Still slowing yourself down. If intensity is increasing, then slowing us down has to be slightly more conscious than our natural reflexes. And our biases are reflexive, as you must understand that may be true, at least to some degree. Check it out. If you have no lab assistant on this, with this, then you are the one who's investigating. You're not investigating to find out what you believe is true only. You're investigating to find out what occurs under these circumstances, under those. And you're keeping in mind that your perception is really based on these levels. So slowly you have to enter into a perception of a deeper level, conscious perception of just a deeper level. This takes time because your bias will interfere with that. Not because a person's negative or bad or anything like that. It's because it does that. Every one of us has these things in us. Unless you're rethinking, being curious about what might lie behind it. And this is not so simple. So attempt the best you can. It's worthy. It's a worthwhile attempt. Do what you can. You are investigating you. You're not following the bias all the time. You're investigating. Be respectful of what you're looking at. Be respectful. Understand that it's natural to have a multiplicity of biases that construct a comfort zone, an evaluation template where you can feel confident enough in engaging with the world and expressing your opinion about the world, whether it may be true or not. Remember, others are investigating as well in their own way, and you're just doing the best you can. No one way is perfect, including ours. Always there's more. Same is true in spiritual development. Always there's more. I don't care what level you think you've got going. Doesn't matter. Matters to you. And you may stop and sell that for about 20 years. Do your best not to, but it doesn't mean you're a bad person if you do. It just means that's what you do. The next level that you attain, you'll do the same thing until you see it. And when you do, now you're going to change your relationship with you, because you'll be in sync with trying to understand you, trying to be helpful to you, like a higher state is. It's not about right or wrong, and it's more about understanding and learning. And you'll get help with that one, if that one's sincere. You can't sell a story to a higher state. It just thinks, oh, you like selling stories. It will do that until you're sick of it. And you're the only one that can get sick of it. And the story will always be protection of the comfort zone. It's normal and natural, not negative. So I wish you well with that one. It's such a good question. Second question, is there a way to meditate without the intellect interfering in any way? Wow, sages have been trying to do this for umpteen years. Our biggest dilemma is that we have an emotional mind and it needs feeding. And when we feed it, it gives us great value. And this is the right thing to do until you perceive something in the mind beyond the emotional mind. And this is what the sages have been talking about forever. When you're doing your own meditations, one trick is to do the pump again. And, this is so difficult. If you can engage with a prayer, how can I put this? Or something that takes your focus off of you, and repeat that over and over again. Understanding everything you're saying, give that job to your intellect. If you want to adjust the prayer, adjust the prayer. Give it its full realm. But in fact, you're trying to get into a state where your personality gets no recognition for having meditated. That's interesting. Trying to lift your interaction with you as a personality into a place where your emotional mind, your intellectual mind, says nothing. One of the things, I'll tell you what may be helpful and may not be helpful. One of the things, you can tell it, get out of here. I'm not interested. This is meditation time. Come back later. Now, that's a weird thing to say, unless you're talking to yourself and you're dealing with yourself. So you have a right to say that. So one of the methods is another method you can use, and you'll find out that you may want to use your own method because that's the training of becoming a human being. Your method, my method, her method is better for her than my method. Like, oh my gosh, this is what we all do. We want to be in charge of our own self, and we're not in charge of our own self. Our reflexes are in charge of our self. Our images are in charge. Okay, let me get away from that. Here you are and you're meditating. If you have a mantra, if you have a favorite prayer, if you have a favorite thing you say to think beyond your personality, to engage with something beyond your personality when you're desperate, start above your head. This one I've found to be really helpful under various circumstances. I use either the 23rd Psalm or the Lord's Prayer, and I adjust it to make me feel as if it makes sense to me. Because it's, you got to understand, it's an interpretation of the Old Testament is an interpretation, an English interpretation of a Jewish Torah kind of thing, or an interpretation of the Aramaic in the New Testament. And it doesn't come out exactly the way things are, but you get an essence that's valuable to you. And maybe that's valuable to you, so use whatever you use. So first of all, say whatever it is above your head. Then begin to be aware of your head in the front, sides, and the back. Then become aware of your face. Then become aware at the back, all the way to the neck, and from the head down. And then be aware of the throat. It's like a body wash. I used to call it a body wash. Other people call it other things. Then become aware of your shoulders. Every time you become aware of something different, stay in that place and be sincere about the mantra and know what the mantra means or the prayer. Because basically you're asking for help from a level that you're not aware of. And I mean that. If you're aware of some kind of way, then you're asking for something, you're asking for help from something beyond that. Keep that in mind, because it's out of the personality bias. Whether you believe what I'm saying or not doesn't matter. Because people have strong biases, and they would resent me saying that is a bias, even though it's real. Be aware of your chest. Be aware behind you at the chest. Be aware of your arms. Keep saying that same thing all the way down your body. Don't leave any body part out. Right down to the bottom of the feet and then below the feet. Then come back. Same thing. All the way back. Yes, that's using your personality as a tool. You will get bored. Continue to do it. This is stupid. This is blah, 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 blah. Doesn't matter. That's your personality too. Do it. Continue. And keep in mind that you are attempting to be in alignment with a state beyond where you are, and I don't care where you are. That is in a gentle, balanced, and at that level, appropriate in its engagement with you. In other words, to soften you down so you can handle it better. And that's kind of a simple healing. It may sound simplistic to many ears, but I can assure you it's very beneficial. You will get to the point where you will forget your prayer. You won't be able to remember it. The intellectual mind will be saying, I don't want to bother. This is too much. Or your intellectual mind will go quiet. And when it does, keep quiet. Let go. If it comes back, just start again. And the next time you go into meditation, it will be different. And the next time you go in, it'll be different. You'll learn how to let go. For example, when you do the focus in the front and back, all the way up to the top of the head, be aware of the alignment at the hairline, come into the brow roughly about this level. If you can see it, it will affect this level and it will affect this level. And these levels are just parts of the brow center and your engagement with using it. And then reach out and then bring your hands down, your attention down between your hands again. And if you do this, then let go. There's always questions. Should I continue doing that during my meditation? If you're still engaging and looking around and thinking, what should I do next? Or, what you're really doing is protecting yourself from change, from growing. This is not a negative thing. This is what we all do. This is part of what the personality does. It maintains itself daily. It really basically doesn't want to change. It wants to help itself to be valued, more valued than it was yesterday. This is the nature of survival, making itself feel valued. That is not negative. And please don't consider it to be, because that is the nature of what a personality does. We do that by engaging with life in various ways. I can do this, I can do that, I can do this, and I can do that. As long as you know you do that, that's just the way personality functions. The sages in the old traditions, let's say we're in a confined space, sometimes no longer than about 8 by 10, small cave. And they would stay there for a number of days, for a month. They'd have 30 day, a special 30 day. And someone would bring them water. Someone might bring them a little bit of milk from one of the sheep or one of the goats or one of the cows. And they would maintain that focus. They weren't maintaining it because it was a 30 day. They were maintaining it to gain access to another state. Because the first days were always difficult. Always, because the personality kicks up like crazy. This isn't what I want to do. I'm not here to do that. I'm here to do this. And then, if you're not careful, after 30 days, you walk around and a chip on your shoulder because you've dealt with 30 days. You're better than anybody else. But that's the personality. With a real sage, what he or she did was they would engage, and they wouldn't want to come out after 30 days because they're engaged with another state. They're not hungry. They're barely able to eat or drink. Not because they don't want to, because they don't think of it. Then they would walk, they would keep that space, that perception that they had when they come out of meditation. And they would walk with that in front of a bus, in front of a this, in front of a that, in front of cattle, because they would not be thinking of anything relative to maintaining life. They weren't against life. They loved it. It was great. It was good. But it wasn't on their mind. And so many of them were looked after. Something was built for them to go and be there. This is not the modern way. But the modern way is to perceive you as you are. In fact, they began to perceive them as they were. The experience of engagement was important. And the respect that they began to diminish within them, for them, was part of their bias disappearing because it wasn't used. I'll end with this story because I have not finished the questions yet. There's at least 1.5 more from Michelle. And I'll do that next time. But the relationship, I remember a yogi that I knew telling this story about his engagement with his so-called teacher, his yogi. And he said he was in a very small ashram. And he was very good at what he did. His yoga was perfect. And he was very flexible. And he was quite engaging. And his teacher saw him as someone who would be very good at having an ashram. So he said to him, I want you to go to a certain place where I have a dear old friend who is a very wonderful teacher. And it will take you quite a while to get there. But I want you to walk through the mountains and get there, and then he will give you instruction. He had been with him for 9.5 years, close to 10 years. He tells the story as 10 years. So at that time, he took off and he went down in the Himalayas. Took him at least, almost a month to get there. Finally arrives at this place and he says, oh yes, I heard of you. His yogi picked up the telephone and phoned him. Said, this guy is, blah, 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 blah. He'll be there in maybe a month. Because he was sincere. And he said, yes, I'm waiting for your instruction. Here's my instruction. Go back to your teacher. Go back to your yogi. And go through the mountains. Every time he went through the mountains, he was meeting people. He was engaging with people. Mountain people. Very small villages, like 50, 40 people, 20 people. Seeing life from a different perspective. Gets back. And he comes back and says to his teacher, I have gone through the Himalayas now for 30 days, and then I met all these people, and then I came back. He just didn't instruct me. He just told me to come back. He says, oh, he gave you that instruction. Okay, good. And then he arrived, and he said, now, here's something I want you to do. Go back. So he said, well, he's my teacher. I better do what he's asked me. And he was going back. He went back, it took another 30 days. He got to this other teacher and big smile on his face. He said, you want me to go back? He says, go back again, all the way through. And on his way back, he began to understand something. It was about him and his importance, so-called, that he made up in his own mind about him being important in the small ashram that was there with other people who were pretty good, but not quite as good as he was. He arrives, and lo and behold, he doesn't go back to the ashram. He engages with people, and he walks around and feels comfortable because he's recognized that the reason why he was treated this way, in a very constructive manner, by the way, is because of his own self-importance. And he realized that that was not about spiritual growth at all. But it took him the last part of the trip to figure it out. And I met him many, many years after that. And he tells this story and he laughs about it. He thought it was the greatest teaching he ever had. Because at that point, he began to realize that he was just beginning to grow. Even he could do all these wonderful things, and he was very, very much an able being. And he did open an ashram. But he was just beginning to grow. And as soon as he realized that, he opened the ashram. So as a beginner, he says, I can teach other people how to begin to begin. He found that really funny. I did too. I thought it was pretty pretty important, pretty valuable. He has died, passed away about, I would say 15 years ago now. But his ashrams are still there and run by an individual, by the way, who he treated not in exactly the same way, but in a similar fashion. I think it's probably time for us to meditate, a little over time. Sorry about that. But we'll just meditate now. And next time, I'll try and finish off Michel Larame's questions if I can. Thanks very much, everybody. Good night.